This week's quick tip, lean into AI. I hope we talk about it because this week I've been using a lot of AIs to just help me in my daily life. That's this week's quick tip. ChatGPT.
Welcome to the Family Legacy Podcast, a podcast that goes beyond legal jargon and gets to the root of how to ensure your past, present, and future are protected. This episode is brought to you by the Rutkowski Law Firm, Michigan's leading asset protection, estate planning, Medicaid, and elder law firm. And here's our host, Michael Rutkowski. Michael, happy Tuesday.
Yeah, happy Tuesday. Here we are again. Love it. Love to be here.
Love having you. Quick tip, AI. So yeah, it seems to be all the rage right now in terms of our conversations. You keep bringing it up. It's clearly top of mind. So
Yeah.
I figured why
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
unpack it
let's
for
talk about it.
everybody.
Let's talk about it. So, I've actually been reading a great book called AI Leadership, which just talks about how to use AI to become a better leader in personal, business, everything. But I've been using ChatGPT and AI now for probably a year and a half, coming on 2 years. And the more I use it, the better it becomes. My tip is for everyone, just lean into it. And I think we get caught up in like what can we use it for? But the cool thing about it is you can ask it what you should use it for. You can literally be like, hey, I'm a dad of 3 girls, and these are my hobbies, and this is what I like to do. How can you help me? And here's a better prompt too. I could give you all the cool prompts. Ask me question by question, so just one question at a time to interview me to learn how you can better help me. And it will, no joke, and we're talking, I use ChatGPT as the one I use, but there's a million of them out there. It will, one question at a time, ask you a bunch of questions and then give you a bunch of suggestions on how you can use it. Perfect example is my wife was going on a girls' trip this last weekend, and I was like, honey, let me show you how cool this is. Like, I just type in there, I said, my wife is going on a trip to Nashville with 3 other girls. Here's kind of, what they like to do. Give me an itinerary. They leave on a Thursday and come back Sunday. And in seconds, it's like hour by hour. Here's all the things you should do. Here's the top rated hotels. Here's, what restaurants you should eat at with like phone numbers to make reservations. It was wild in seconds. It's just, I think it's like the Google of the future. Like we all Google things now. I think there's going to be a day where we just chat GPT things to find out like our answers to whatever.
All the things. I mean, it is happening on Google. So if you Google something, then the answer comes to you. It's not quite as conversational yet, but they do have Gemini that they're working on behind the scenes that I think you can get the beta of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I use ChatGPT too. I'm a big fan. I like to use it for recipes because I have a weird diet. So I'll ask
Yeah.
it for my daughter loves chili. So I'm like, all right, give me a good gluten-free vegan chili recipe. And
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
it
And
is.
and the cool thing is, like your recipe example, you can ask it questions because sometimes you're reading a recipe and you're a little confused of like the order of something or whatever. You can, after it gives you the recipe, you can be like, how in advance should I turn on the oven? Like if there's simple things like that that you don't understand, or like, do I need to let this sit out? Or there's could be a million
Hmm.
questions you have, but you can ask the recipe questions or chat GPT questions about the recipe that you're not going to find if you just Google the recipe. So it's just so cool. And I think there's a lot of nervousness about using it, about like, what is it tracking, all of that. To me, and everyone is obviously can have their own opinions on all this. But if you keep it simple like that, who cares if they know your favorite chili recipe? That's
I
my
mean,
opinion.
if you're using Google to ask these questions, you're training Google. You're training
Yeah,
something in one
right,
way or another. Your behavior online is training something.
yeah,
So unless you have proprietary information, like we're a digital marketing agency, and so we have client information that we can't share. So we've actually bought the
right,
product, right? And it says because we are a paying customer, this does not
right.
train
Yeah.
GPT, right? So there are ways to make sure of that, but you really don't need it unless it's really for business use cases. Everything else,
Yeah.
everything we do online is being tracked and trading stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what's the big deal? So
What's the big
that's
deal?
my thing for this week is try it out. Instead of Googling something, chat GPT it, maybe let's throw the link to the one
Yep.
you or I use in below. It's just such a good tool.
It is. And you can download the
It
app. So you can have the app on your phone and just pull it up whenever you need it to have it at your
yeah.
fingertips.
Yeah. It has to be seen as a tool that enhances us, not replaces us.
True story. It is not,
Yeah.
AI is not coming for us. All it is a parrot. If you think about
Yeah.
it that way, it is literally just taking what already exists on the internet and regurgitating it back to us in a conversational manner. That's it.
Right.
It's all
Yep.
needed.
That's
It has
it.
no emotions. It doesn't understand context. It's
That's
just a
it.
tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Cool.
All right. Speaking of tools, when we're estate planning, we have a new landing page launching here soon. Maybe it's live by the time you're listening to this. And it's got this whole wonderful list of all things that go into estate planning. And one of them is tax planning. And so I wanted to take a minute to really understand how how estate planning can help us with our taxes, because that seems like um an opportunity for us to, it's October, we got a few months left
Yeah.
here in the year, and
Year-end
then
planning.
April will be here before we know it. So how can we get out ahead how can estate planning help with tax planning? So can you just help us understand, Michael, from a very high level of how these two things work together, tax planning and estate planning?
Yeah, yeah, great question. And it's something that's top of mind for almost every client that we meet with. You're talking about estate planning. Taxes is always an issue we're discussing. Um, right now, a lot of people don't have to worry about taxes, and we'll talk about why. But either way, estate planning is a very effective tool if you have an inheritance tax to be paid after you pass away, to transfer wealth from one generation to the next without having to pay those taxes, because those taxes can be heavy, 40% plus, if you're subject to estate tax. So let's dive into a couple rules. And so, like, I know people are going to be listening to this all over the place. So we're going to go high level. We're going to talk about federal estate tax. We're going to talk about state estate tax. Here's something that's really important. Back in 2017, there was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that made federal estate tax. Right now, it adjusts every year with inflation, but let's just call it, for round numbers, it's $12 million for an individual or $24 million for a joint couple. So what that means is, if your estate as a married couple is less than 24 million, you are not going to pay any federal estate tax. As a single individual, it's 12 million. So if your assets are less than 12 million as a single individual, you will pay no federal estate tax. So I know what you're thinking right now. That probably doesn't apply to most of the population, but everyone's worried about taxes. That being said, though, that Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 is going to sunset at the end of 2025. So we're getting into that year. At the end of the year, it could potentially sunset because it was only supposed to go till the end of 2025. Who knows what Congress is going to do? We're financial advisors and estate planning attorneys. We're all tracking this to see where this is going. Are they going to increase it? Are they going to keep it the same? Are they going to just let it sunset? Because if it's sunset, it goes back to half. And then now more people are going to be affected by federal estate tax. So stay tuned to this podcast. We'll probably be talking about it all next year, because I'm sure there's going to be stuff that's going to be coming out. But unless you're over those amounts, you currently don't need to be planning for taxes for inheritance purposes. Now, you still have all of this year to take advantage of those high numbers if you are subject to estate tax. And maybe we'll get into today, maybe it might be the next podcast, of the actual strategies to do this. But at least let's set the groundwork for what tax we need to worry about. Does that make sense, Carrie?
Yeah, I have a couple questions just for
Sure.
clarifying reasons. When we're talking about, so in terms of tax planning, you don't need to do any sort of tax planning with estate planning, or does estate planning at any level help in terms of reducing
Great.
your potential
Yeah.
need to pay taxes?
Yeah, great question. So your standard revocable living trust, for tax purposes, it's as though you own things personally. So that helps nothing when it comes to tax. It doesn't minimize tax. It does nothing for tax. There are certain irrevocable trusts that take assets outside of the taxable estate. Okay, so that's when we get into more comprehensive planning. If here's a great example. There's something called an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust. The sole purpose of this type of trust, again, remember, there's like 60 types of trust. So this is just one we're talking about. This type of trust holds life insurance so that that asset is not countable for estate tax purposes, because otherwise it is. If you had a $5 million policy, it could be a term policy that pays out to your children if you pass away, that is part of your estate. Okay, so it could be that bumps up someone's estate quite a bit, even though you don't realize it during your life. You have this huge asset. So it's very simple to put something like that in a irrevocable trust, because you don't need access to it anyways. There's only a death benefit. So that's just one tool when it comes to estate tax, but that could be very beneficial. But we don't even need to look at those things unless you total up all of your assets, life insurance, retirement accounts, homes, properties, you name it, all of that stuff. If it doesn't go above 12 million as an individual, 24 as a married couple, you don't have to worry about federal estate tax.
So you're not going to be taxed at all, even if it goes into a trust and then your kids or grandkids want to take money out. It's not going to matter.
Yeah,
on the
federal level, you're not going to be taxed. Now, there are a bunch of states, so let me list through all of those that have some type of inheritance or state tax. So I'm just looking at another screen. I'm just gonna read them off to you guys because I'm a Michigan attorney, but it's Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington. Okay, so know that those states have state estate tax. So you need to meet with your estate planner in that state to see if there's some type of planning you can do to reduce your taxable estate. Does that make sense? But otherwise, on the federal level, and if you're not one of those states, there's no estate tax to be paid when you pass.
Okay, that's helpful. I was thinking that.
So that being said, I can just keep going all day. That being said, though, there is something that we always get asked where I'm like, people are like, Mike, okay, I get it. There's no estate tax. What other taxes do I have to worry about? If there is an account like an IRA or a 401k that you have not paid taxes on yet, your beneficiaries are going to have to pay tax when they inherit the money. So that's just normal. If you didn't pay tax, someone's got to pay tax at some point in time. That has nothing to do with federal estate tax, state estate tax, inheritance, nothing like that. That's just normal taxes that if you didn't pay them, someone's got to pay them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so, is there anything that we should be thinking about? What about from a business standpoint? If we're business owners and we're, and the part of our business, part of the half I own a business, right? And so I'm a 50% owner. And let's say, my half of the business goes to my kids or my husband or whoever, pay all my beneficiaries. What happens to that side of the house in terms of taxes?
Yeah. And I might lump that into just appreciating assets. So if, that's all going to be counted. What's the value of your business? That's all going to be counted in your estate. So if maybe you're just, you're not taking a lot from the business, but it's growing and it has a significant value, that could be part of the estate that if you pass down to your kids could be taxable. There's a lot of different really cool trusts out there to hold these interests. One of them is called a SLAT, a spousal lifetime access trust. So if you have a spouse, you can transfer an asset to this trust that your spouse still has access to. So the big key here when doing tax planning or any type of irrevocable trust planning is, what access do I have to the assets? And a lot of people get really scared by irrevocable trusts because if you start Googling, maybe this is where people should be using ChatGPT. They'll get better answers. But if you start Googling irrevocable trusts, You're going to read all about these trusts that you can't be the trustee of. You have to, you don't have access to the assets anymore, but yes, it avoids that huge estate tax. Well, there's some newer types of trust like the slat that your spouse can have access to it. So that's almost as good as you having access to it, right? Problem could be if your spouse passes away. Now it's kind of locked up in this trust. But there are some newer trusts, because we're always fighting that balance of how do we give our clients still have access to the asset, but it has all these cool features as well. Lawsuit protection, bankruptcy, creditors, taxes, what are we trying to accomplish? So it's always this balance of can we accomplish the goal with still allowing some type of access to the asset if we need it.
Yeah. Yeah, but we covered that in our last podcast, so go check
Yeah.
that out about irrevocable trusts. Hey, I did it.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at that. Let's assume the folks are listening that generally we understand that most people don't have 12 million sitting around.
Yeah.
But maybe you're on your
Sure.
way there. Maybe you're younger, maybe you're planning, maybe you have maybe you're an engineer working for a big company who's
Yeah.
looking for a happy payday to come. So in thinking futuristically of what this could mean for you, let's talk about some strategies of why you might want to consider. So you reach that 12
Yeah.
million as an individual or 24 million as a family. Like, what do you need to be considering
Yeah.
in terms of how
Yeah. So
taxes
if
impact?
you're if you have a really good growth path going, you got a startup that's starting to really take off or something. Transferring ownership to a trust like that slat could be very beneficial because the growth of the asset doesn't matter. It's the value at the time of the transfer. So here's a more relatable one for people. In the state of Michigan, a lot of people have cottages or second vacation homes. And maybe you buy it today with no intention to sell it. Well, if we transfer it into one of these trusts, the value would, let's just say we bought it today or 30 years ago, we bought it for 100,000 and now it's worth $1 million. The countable part of your estate is only going to be that 100,000 if it's in this certain type of trust. Does that make sense? So
Wow.
the appreciation on the asset in the trust is non-countable for your estate. So something like that could be very beneficial for someone who's on a huge growth path for acquiring assets. Their business is taking off. The value at the time we transfer their ownership to the trust is what counts. So it could be worth 20 million 30 years from now, but all that matters is what was the value at the time we
100,000.
transferred it to the trust.
Does that mean
Lots
you could
of
have
cool stuff.
does that mean you could have multiple trusts in your name then?
That is such a great question, because we get that one all the time. Absolutely. So usually once you start getting into more complex estate planning, you're going to have multiple trusts because they all have different goals. You'll probably have some type of foundational revocable living trust for just your family assets. Then you might have some type of trust for tax planning, trust for asset protection. At the end of the day, you might even have a cottage trust because you want it to stay in the family and you want to set the rules on who's paying the taxes, doing the upkeep, how does this all work? Let this stay in the family. So yes, once we get into more comprehensive estate plan, you're just going to start layering on trusts. You can have as many as you need.
It's fascinating. I guess that helps too from a tax standpoint when you're into that 12, 24 million piece because you can
Yeah.
lock up those assets, not touch them.
And I know we're getting short on time here, but we could dive deep into, there's all these awesome trusts too for tax planning that you can give away your exemption. So your 12 million, you can give that away and then you can start getting it back through it's called it's an annuity trust, but essentially you give away your 12 million, you gift it away. So you use your lifetime exemption and then over time you get it back and you can use it again. So many cool tools.
Wow. I think we have to do a whole podcast on gifting. That
Yeah.
sounds intense, but
Yeah.
awesome. The fact that you can give it away and then what? That
Yeah.
doesn't even make
Yeah.
any sense.
For sure.
Look at you
For
planting all
sure.
these seeds.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna circle back on that. Last piece of advice for people who are thinking who haven't really maybe considered this as needing estate planning and maybe they're on their trajectory for this or they have it already. What sort of like the one gotcha with this? or the mistakes people make most often when
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes is one, being scared about, nervous about using irrevocable trusts. I think they're more flexible than people think. We've just learned over time about the IRS version. So just getting educated about it. Another big no-no is, if you have complex situations or planning that you want to do, you can't accomplish this through an online service. It doesn't work. There's too many moving parts. The drafting needs to be very specific if you want to maintain access to the assets. So just working with a professional who knows this stuff in and out. It's really important.
when you say there's online tools that
There
that's kind
are.
of scary.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
who?
There's Trust and Will for some foundational estate planning. There's LegalZoom. We've probably all heard of that one.
Oh yeah.
Um, and they're popping up left and right. The problem we find is that when we work with clients who have tried those services, there's no guidance there. So we saw a trust just a month ago where someone actually accidentally made the beneficiary the trustee, and they cut out their kids from being inherited under the trust because they just put them in the wrong spot, which that would have played. I'm glad we caught that, because otherwise they just, disinherited all their kids from their estate. That was wild.
News bears. That's
Yeah.
terrifying. Okay, good to know. Well, if you've been listening to this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. You can contact us at mlr@rutkowskilawfirm.com to share any questions you have that maybe we could answer for you. Michael, before we close out here, next 7 days, what are you most looking forward to?
Good question. I think I'm going out surfing one more time this on a surfboat one more time. We're right in the middle of like football season for our kids, which is cool. My daughter's on the dance team, so we're going to the homecoming game on Friday and just spending time with the girls. They're at such a great age. That's it. It's real simple.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah,
that. Yes, the fall season is the best time to get outside with the kids for the one
yeah,
last hurrah.
yeah.
So, looking forward to hearing what you all got up to this weekend.
Perfect. Perfect.
Well, thank you to our listeners. Like I mentioned, if you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. This episode was brought to you by the Rutkowski Law Firm, Michigan's leading asset protection, estate planning, Medicaid, and elder law firm. And if you'd like help with your estate planning or asset protection needs, please call 248-955-2842. That's 248-955-2842. See you next time.
See you guys. Take care.